The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NFL Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NFL from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NFL Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NFL.
Bad news for the Buccaneers as Tristan Wirfs will miss multiple weeks.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We have to talk about it. It's probably one of the top 5 worst things that could have come out about the Bucs as we're just a couple of weeks away from training camp. But Tristan Wirfs is set to miss multiple games having knee surgery on Tuesday. We're going to talk about how this affects the offense as well as the roster coming up in a little bit. But Evan, let's just start with the news in general that Wirfs had surgery. There was more damage than initially thought. Now it looks like he is going to start the season on the physically unable to perform list.
Well, possibly. It's
right.
Looking like it.
Yeah, it's not definite, but it looks to be trending in that direction. And if that's the case, he's guaranteed to miss the first 4 games. That's at Atlanta, at Houston in prime time, home against the Jets, home against the Eagles. So what was your reaction to the news on Wednesday morning?
I mean, confusion, right? Confusion in the sense that if it was this severe of an issue, it's troublesome as to why it was, has such a result where he's going to miss like a quarter of the season, right? Like we haven't even started training camp yet. And we're waiting till July 8th to have surgery. So, I need more information on how this all happened before truly understanding the gravity of how all these decisions were made. But I definitely want some answers. I think the fans deserve some answers. Maybe it was just a miscalculation or a setback. Tristan tweaked it. We'll find out. But that's the confusion part. Where I was not too confused is, David Shealy and myself were at mandatory minicamp. We didn't see Tristan for any of the voluntary stuff, which I guess maybe should have triggered me a little bit. Veterans sitting out for voluntary stuff, not rare. But given how Tristan was so excited to be a part of practice last year when he was going through the contract stuff, he hated sitting out practice. So he seemed like one of those guys like Antoine, certainly like Jamel, some of the veterans that show up during the voluntary portion. But when he was out there for the mandatory stuff, he did not look good. He was in that big old brace. They had him off to the side. He looked like when he was trying to get back to play post-bye week against the Giants, that's how he looked to me. Like he looked like a dude that was just going through it. And I think all of us, at least the day that I was out there, I'm turning left and right going like, man, Tristan looks bad. And Bowles, of course, said, it's precautionary and he should be ready for training camp. So you think, oh, maybe it's a sprain. Maybe it's something that he'll just have to lay off for a month and he'll be good. But obviously it's much worse. And, now we got to discuss the ramifications of it.
Yeah, it's not a good time. And Hugo on Twitter reached out. I had forwarded you the message because we were going to talk about it. And Hugo said, "Hi, James, question. If he's been carrying this injury since last season, why is he having the surgery now and not a few months ago? Greetings from Uruguay." He wrote that part in Spanish. I'm not going to butcher the pronunciation. I'll give you the translation. But yeah, I mean, to your point, you're not the only one kind of confused by it. Hugo's confused by it.
And remember this, that standard operating procedure for any NFL team out there. The season is over. You go through your end-of-season interviews. You also go through your end-of-season medical stuff. And decisions are made about, do you have to do surgery? Hey, like you're going to have to, rehab this injury, that injury. I mean, every player is like hurt at the end of the season. So, there's a multitude of things that you got to really worry about once the year is over. So there had to have been, and this isn't with me talking to anybody, but based on the SOP here, there had to have been a conversation between Tristan and the Bucs medical team about what to do about that knee, because obviously it was a problem last season, and entering the offseason, they needed to figure out what to do with that thing. Somehow, we don't know exactly what those conversations were. Hopefully we have more information in a couple of weeks when training camp begins, but ultimately the decision was to let it heal and see if that was going to do the case and lay off the surgery. How that decision came about, why it turned why it went so south, and why they went in there and there was more issues to be found, we don't know, and we're gonna have to sit on that one for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and according to Rick Stroud, he had said that Wirfs had aggravated a right knee injury that he suffered last season. The Bucs had scheduled arthroscopic surgery on Tuesday, but there was more damage than what they initially thought, and I think that's kind of where the timetable gets all screwed up. Maybe if things were the way that they thought they were going to be, now he might miss the beginning of training camp, maybe even miss the first game of the season. It probably isn't quite as long of a potential recovery period as it looks like they're going to have now. But this was a gut punch to the Bucs, to Bucs fans, to a lot of people out there, because no one really saw it coming. It's really kind of frustrating, especially when you take a look at the fact, and we're going to get to the roster and the depth chart a little bit later, but you take a look at the fact that Justin School was allowed to walk out the door when he filled in for Wirfs last year. And I'm not going to say he was, the same level, because nobody's on the level of Tristan Wirfs, but he was serviceable. And so now,
and there was continuity there and whatnot. Just remember for everybody out there, outside of the game against the Giants, School was somebody who played and got better at right tackle. We don't have a lot of tape necessarily of him at left. And the game he played at left, they were against the Giants. And that was one of the snoozers of the season, actually, for this team. So it would have been different, but certainly the continuity would have helped, since continuity has been the key word this offseason. And I think it just – I don't want to be hyperbolic here. Do we want to talk about – I have a positive spin zone here. Give you the other side of the coin to it. Obviously, we can always talk about the negatives with Tristan Wirfs being injured. That's really obvious, right? It's a problem. And between Tristan Wirfs being healthy and injured, I'm going to choose healthy 900 times out of 900. But here's what I'll say in just the projection of this team. This is what's good news. This is coming down the chute, right? When Gedeke got hurt week 2, he threw School into the fire. You learned the hard way some of the things he could not do when he faced Aiden Hutchinson, and there was a chip plan and all these things devised moving forward. I even looked at the runs last year, right versus left. So they started that Detroit game, and they actually leaned on the School side. There were 7 runs to the outside on the right, and there were 3 runs to the left. That didn't really work out too well, to the point where we got to the Atlanta game, the last of School's stay there at right tackle before Gedeke, and we had 7 runs to the left, 4 runs to the right. So and by the way, all those runs to the right were in the first half. In the fourth quarter, everything went to the left. So you're going to find out what people can do. But my point is, Liam Cohen was fact-finding things about Justin School in live time, in the middle of the season, in the beginning, just when you're in the heat of the moment. They got 6 weeks, 8 if you include the next couple of weeks, where Grizzard can really hunker down and start thinking about some things that they want to do. So they will enter the season. The first few games are typically scripted to an extent. They know what they're going to do. So they'll have a game plan. They will know what to do. They'll also know what Heck can and cannot do effectively. And I would imagine even though it's probably a little bit scary to play him in preseason games, you're going to have to play him in some preseason games to get him some live action and to really see what he can do. Obviously, if he were to get hurt, that would be a big problem. But I also tend to be someone that says it's football and you got to learn about him. And though, you're obviously going to hold out other people on the offensive line. So, we can get to that discussion another time. But you have time on your side at least. So that's the good here, is you don't have to start scrambling around pieces week 2. You got a whole training camp. They'll build out the continuity. They'll figure something out until Tristan can come back.
Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drink, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed.
A ton of rumors swirling around about Najee Harris and a potential firework accident this week. And
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Daniel, I thought there was absolutely no way that this was a real story, a real situation. It had to be a fabrication. Lo and behold, it absolutely was not. Najee Harris was involved in a firework accident that resulted into a superficial eye injury. What is that going to do for his prospects for the start of this 2025 season? We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to get into the players with the most to prove going into training camp. Guys like Quentin Johnston, obviously heading into year 3. This is a big season. Some may say it's make or break. Zion Johnson transitioning to center. How's that going to go? And then Junior Colson, after a down rookie season, this is a big one for him to see if he can break out.
there's a lot of players with a lot to prove. And for some guys, it's like, hey, if it's doing and happening like this again, like you might not get another crack at it in 2026. But this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. David, this was a buy or sell. This was an overreaction. This is something we both sold on Wednesday's show and something maybe we should have bought a little bit more. Obviously, I thought it was weird, and we kind of laid out what the facts of it were on Wednesday as far as there being a firework accident in Najee Harris's hometown, but no actual real reporting on it. Well, the real reporting came out in droves on Thursday, and this is a statement that was let out by Doug Hendrickson before any of the big news scoopers could actually get anything out. He said Najee Harris was present at a 4th of July event where a fireworks mishap resulted in injuries to several attendees. Najee sustained a superficial eye injury during the incident, but is fully expected to be ready for the upcoming NFL season. Let's start with this, the obvious. Dumb. Just so dumb. Like, it's crazy to me that players still find themselves in these situations where you have illegal fireworks, according to reports, industrial strength fireworks, according to reports, in an area that you're not actually legally allowed to set them off, and something bad happens. You do things, you add up all three of those things, yeah, something bad is going to happen. Now, good news that he's expected to play this season, David, obviously, but like, you see this and you're like, man, like, so dumb, like, stupid that this happened, but also like feels like a big bullet or firework was dodged in this case.
Yeah, I just don't understand how NFL players put themselves in these type of situations when, to me, it seems like they're completely avoidable. Like, you know how important you are and what these things can do. And I brought it up when we talked about it on Wednesday. There's a gigantic example of how bad it can go with Jason Pierre-Paul basically missing part of his hand. because of a firework accident. Now, we don't know all of the details of exactly
Sure.
what happened with the situation, so not going to cast any blame other than the fact that you shouldn't be putting yourselves in these types of situations where these type of results can occur. So it's just one of those things, like, you got to know how to control what you can control and the situations and the environments that you're in and the people that you are around. When we're talking about fireworks, this is something that can go horribly wrong, not just with Jason Pierre-Paul. We've seen it with numerous examples throughout the world, throughout the history of time. This is something that can cause major, major damage. And thankfully, according to the reports, it's just a superficial eye injury, and it should not at least threaten his career, which it absolutely could have.
Absolutely, it could have. And this is the thing, like, superficial eye injury makes it seem better, but it also kind of feels like we don't know everything yet, man. Like, and when it took so long for everything to actually come out, and honestly, shout out to the Chargers sleuths and the, small accounts that had it right to an extent from the get-go. I mean, it sounds like he still has his eyeball, right? Because if you're saying superficial, that's at least something I feel safe saying, is that he still has both of his eyes intact. At the same time, like, there's a picture of him. There's no, real kind of reports. The Chargers declined to comment reportedly as well on it.
No surprise there.
And man, this is a dude who has a lot of money. Like, he didn't have crazy prospects in free agency. He signed quickly, but it wasn't a multi-year deal. It wasn't a, double digits and millions kind of a deal. We're going to talk about guys with a lot to prove, man. He has something to prove, and a first round running back that's going to be nipping at his heels. But like this, even though you're saying expects to start the season, man, we're like a month and a half out, a month and a week out from this season.
I mean, the Chargers are playing a football game at the end of the month, Daniel.
Yeah, man. Like, and it's just like that training camp time could be important too, because this is his first year in this offense. So great to know he'll be back for the season, but like, how long is this superficial injury going to keep him out?
Yeah, that's a huge question mark. And we saw last year what happened with Justin Herbert, right? With his injury and how much that affected him in the beginning of his season. Like, you just don't know. And, Justin obviously is a supercomputer, so that's a little bit of a different situation. But with Najee, as you pointed out, this is a completely new situation, a new team, a new offense. All of these things, all of these elements require you to be on the field as much as possible so you can drill it and drill it and drill it and make sure that you have that muscle memory programmed. The more time that you miss, the more detrimental it's going to be to your ability to pick up this offense and go out there and execute it immediately.
Well, we lost David. His internet went out mid-show, so it's going to be me taking over for the rest of it here. But glad he got to give his thoughts on Najee Harris. I mean, just what a crazy story that we're talking about. And if you don't think the Chargers curse is real, this whole incident happened on Spano Street, which I think says a lot, and I mean, makes a lot of sense, as Chargers fans know. Something that is seemingly happened to them, weird stuff, crazy stuff all the time. But I think the next big question is kind of what this means for Omarion Hampton, because even though this is something that is outside of football, we have to look at the football perspective of this. And I think with Najee Harris having this happen, for his agent, who obviously isn't going to want to raise more alarm than is necessary, saying that he'll be ready for the season, that's just a very specific type of message that it's sending, which means he is going to miss some time, just not enough time to have him miss games. But I think for Omarion Hampton, what this just means is an opportunity, potentially an opportunity to cut into that whatever share was going to be between him and Najee Harris, and potentially take that job over sooner rather than later, maybe even going into week one as the main bell cow back, which may have happened either way. There's a lot of reasons to believe, because of the explosiveness that he brings to the table, because of just the prospects of what he could be and what his ceiling is, that he will take over. But it did feel like it might be a more gradual thing with a team that really loves Najee Harris, a guy in Najee Harris that Jim Harbaugh has been recruiting since, his high school days, basically, and kind of always wanted him on the team. A guy that the Chargers went and picked up on the first day of free agency, which I think tells you how much they think of him. But with all of those things, it's also, he has to be there. He has to prove that he should get those carries. He has to not be an obvious kind of disadvantage to you outside of playing someone like Omarion Hampton, who might bring those other things to the table. So one accident could mean something beneficial for a rookie like Omarion Hampton, who is looking to kind of earn that role, and he'll still have to, and hopefully he's always cracked up to be, because man, this rushing attack with Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton, two big physical backs that can hurt you multiple ways in the passing game and the running game, felt really good compared to what the Chargers have had in that backfield as far as running a traditional run game and fixing what has been such a weakness for this team. It's hard for this not to impact how you feel about that a little bit, not knowing necessarily what Najee Harris's availability is going to be, how late he's going to be picking up this offense. He is a veteran. It is still a new offense. So maybe an opportunity for Omarion Hampton, but a bad thing for the Chargers running game overall, or at least something that's going to have to work itself out during training camp whenever Najee Harris can get out there.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Look, they're saving you money already.
The Philadelphia Eagles have the deepest roster in the NFL in 2025.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast.
Pro Football Focus has been ranking their positions throughout the last couple of weeks, and the Eagles were number one in the majority of these categories. They were top 5, at least top 10 in pretty much every spot. Top to bottom, Howie Roseman has built this thing like a juggernaut through free agency, through trades, through the draft, short-term, long-term talent. The Eagles, you name it, they have everything you need. Versatile talent, speed, size, everything. Like anything you're looking for. If you're going to the supermarket that is an NFL roster and saying, I need this and this and this and this, but I don't want to take all these trips, what roster can I go to and pick it clean? It would be the Eagles roster. But I will say, there is one position. Like if you ask the question, let's say the Eagles run into injuries this year. What position could be in trouble the most? Where could there be a significant drop-off compared to the starter, or the biggest drop-off compared to the starter? What position is that? The Eagles have been lucky. They have not dealt with a lot of serious injuries since this new era, the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni era. We're used to this catastrophic, historic amount of injuries in 2017 taking place, 2018, 2019, 2020. The Doug Peterson, Carson Wentz era was riddled and plagued with injuries. All we've known with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni in this core is a fully healthy roster. Let's say that's not the case in 2025, and their luck catches up to them, and they have to really rely on their depth. Like their depth of this roster, a young depth chart, is really tested this year. I think they're okay in a lot of spots, but what position might have the biggest drop-off? For me, I do believe it's offensive tackle. I think tackle is obviously the spot that would have the biggest drop-off. And I really do like what the Eagles have done with their depth chart for Jeff Stoutland. Stoutland University has a lot of intriguing long-term pieces, like obviously bringing in Hinton, Williams, Kendall on day 3 of the draft. Like I think Drew Kendall can be a long-term center or guard, primary backup. I think he could even start at right guard in 2025. I've said that on our squad show. I think Cameron Williams could be the steal of the draft. A lot of analysts say, draft experts say, if he was in next year's draft, this could be a second or third round pick instead of a day 3 selection. I think Miles Hinton is a massive human being with a lot of raw traits that Stoutland could turn into a legitimate player on the offensive line. But these are all rookies that we're talking about. These are all inexperienced players that if you go from Jordan Mailata or Lane Johnson to one of those guys, like I feel like from the jump in year 1, it's probably going to be a bigger drop-off than it would have been going to Fred Johnson last year. And now the Eagles did sign a veteran with a lot of starting experience. They did bring in Kendall Lamb from the Miami Dolphins, who started 7 games last year for Miami. He started 8 games in 2023. So they do have some experience to replace Fred Johnson. But overall, like, Kendall Lamb, I think, is a downgrade from who Fred Johnson was. I like the young depth, but you got to remember the Eagles have 2 of the top 5 tackles in the NFL. So by that bar that's set in Philadelphia, it's going to be the biggest drop-off going from one of them to potentially a day 3 rookie or a Kendall Lamb. But also just in general, I think in the NFL, tackle is normally where the biggest drop-off takes place on most rosters. So I don't really think this should be that surprising of a take. I mean, just look at what happens when Lane Johnson doesn't play in football games for the Eagles since, 2016, like when he's dealt with injuries or suspensions. This team is nowhere near the same when Lane Johnson's not out there. And I think it would be a similar thing if Jordan Mailata wasn't at left tackle. One thing they could consider, though, if they don't believe in Kendall Lamb, if these rookies just aren't ready to be primary backups to Lane and to Mailata, I do wonder if, and Tyler Steen's the starting right guard right now, so, he's going to be in that spot. But I do wonder if there was a long-term injury to Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata, would they consider putting Tyler Steen at tackle, where he played primarily at Alabama before the Eagles took him in the 3rd round to be an inside-out kind of tweener pick? Maybe they consider that. Either way, I think when you look at tackle compared to even guard, I think the guard options are a lot better. You look at maybe wide receiver would be a big drop-off, but you also have Dallas Goedert in this equation, and you have Jahan Dotson. Linebacker actually has a good amount of depth this year. So does the defensive line. I like the secondary depth too. Maybe if one of those top corners got hurt, you're talking Eli Ricks and Adoree Jackson. But I think the biggest drop-off, where the Eagles could be in the most trouble this year if they suffer injuries, would be especially Lane Johnson. If they lose Lane this year at any point, I think that could cause issues. But again, the Eagles are extremely deep at pretty much every position. I do really like a lot of their tackle depth. I like a lot of their options. But like a lot of this roster that's pretty expensive at the top now, you got to get younger and cheaper below the top, the top 22 starters of this roster. When those guys are getting top 10 annual salaries at each position across the offense, your depth chart can't be as expensive with veteran talent. And naturally, that's going to make your roster more of a projection. It's going to be less proven, but these guys got to go out there and show it. And I think training camp will really help us kind of get a feel for what they have, not just with their starters, obviously. I think we know what they have in their starters, but what we have in a lot of these backups that are going to have to step up, because now a Moro Ijoma type is going to go from a rotational backup to a starter. Jalix Hunt as well. So as those backup role players from last year move up to starting spots, now these backups, these third strings, these newbies from the draft and free agency, they got to step up into those roles as well. So I think tackle would be my answer for where the biggest drop-off could be if there are injuries this year. I do think, and Lane Johnson talked about it the other day, about knowing that Father Time is undefeated in the NFL, even though he mentally feels young. He knows the reality of the NFL with aging linemen, that they can't play forever. I do think this is going to be the year in 2026, this upcoming NFL draft, where the Eagles finally do draft a tackle in the first 2 rounds. They haven't done that since taking Andre Dillard in 2019. I personally don't love having a tackle be redshirted for multiple years, waiting in the wings. But I think next year they'll probably say, okay, Lane at this point probably has 1 or 2 more years. Let's bring in that tackle now so we're not caught off guard when he retires and we're not trying to scramble. Let's be a little proactive. I don't want them to be extremely proactive and take a guy that's waiting for 2 to 3 years. But if they know Lane's going to retire next year, or in 2027, which I think he probably will at that point, especially if they get another ring this year or that year, I think this will probably be the year they finally invest in the tackle position early in the draft, because although I like the young guys right now, they don't really have that next stud waiting in the wings, right? They don't have that Jordan Mailata behind Jason Peters and Lane Johnson, and maybe they do. Maybe one of those day 3 guys are that player, but I think next year is where that significant asset is used on tackle for the first time in at that point, it would have been crazy enough 7 years, which is nuts, but that's the reality.